Okay, sitting here with Jonas Riess. We met this summer. I was in Zurich, Switzerland, and I met Sam Boehringer, and I was like telling him there's tendon people all over the world, and I don't know of any tendon people in Switzerland. And I was headed to Bern, Switzerland, and he said, I need to meet you because you're the German version of myself. And I was like, how have I never heard of this guy? So yeah, we met up for a day, had a really good talk, and then we said we're going to do a podcast. So here we are. But tell everyone who you are.
Yeah, that's funny enough because this is what I said myself. Like I'm the German speaking Jake Tura, but that's probably because you don't know me before. Because I only like the most stuff that I come up with is in German, so I never reached out to the big market. Yeah, but I can't remember. I think in like I played American football for 12 years in Europe, and I developed patellar tendinopathy myself. And in parallel to playing football, that was my job and profession. Studied sports science, being a strength coach. And so I worked myself really deep into the topic and started to rehab myself. And then that was the time like 2017, 18, 19. And a lot of people came to me, bros from the team, and told me, yeah, my physio, my doctor, they told me to make 4 weeks rest, 6 weeks rest, put ice on it, like the passive treatment classical. And so the deeper I dived into the topic, the clearer the picture became. And so I started to treat closer people around me. But since it was my profession to be a strength coach, athletic trainer, sorry, in America or in North America, athletic trainer is more like a physio over here. So I was a I am a strength and conditioning coach. So I worked on this topic deeper and deeper, and it became how can you say, like one of my bigger business things. Self-employed back then. And then more and more people reached out to me. And I think the most important part was when you work really with high-level athletes, professional athletes, then you have these high responsibilities. Like, okay, they reach out to you in the hope that you can help them in a time period before a certain competition or something. And then it's not like try and error, okay, maybe I can do something for you. You dive into being really responsible. And that worked very well. And so I came up with an own program, probably like you, like very close, like the Jumpers Knee project or program and so on. And yeah, and so I became in the German speaking area, like Germany, Switzerland, Austria. Yeah, like the tendon guy and be a lecturer and being with physical therapists or athletic trainers as a lecturer, and still working and now working in professional beach volleyball in Switzerland, where I also have athletes with patellar and quadriceps tendinopathy mainly. So that's the story in very short.
Yeah, I mean, you started before me. I think I started looking into tendons in like the year 2019, maybe. Um, but I had the patellar tendinopathy when it was like 2010, I think, and then I just was like, "There's nothing out there on this. I don't care. I'm just gonna lift weights." Um, what was it like in 2017 for you to come up having the patellar tendinopathy? Because yeah, when I had it in 2010, I think it was 2010. Yeah, it was like I couldn't find anything useful online. What did you find at 2017? How did you develop some base of knowledge so you could start helping
Yeah, it
people?
was so funny because I remember everything. I remember, like, in American football in Europe is not as big as in North America. And so we were training in the winter on concrete parking lots. And so I remember exactly when I sprinted on concrete and I had this sharp pain for the first time, but it was not like tearing a muscle, like small, kept training, didn't think anything. And then the next time I came back, same pain. And so that was the beginning. I remember this very clearly. And yeah, it increased over the off season. When I started to do my research, I remember that I was for holiday and can't remember where we were, but it was in a warm South European country. I remember I couldn't walk down stairs because I was in so much pain. And then I remember that there was like let's call it an overview paper, and I tried everything. And the basic thing was stretching, rest, and they published something. It is called gua sha. It's from traditional Chinese medicine, and you take like a very mm, let's call it soft stone, and you do basically like I think you could call it manual therapy, and you take the stone and scrap over your tendon. And I bought this stone online. I did this because it was so lost, and you can see clearly the like a lot of people. And I remember also that my coach in football, he said when we had an excuse because we fucked up a play or something, he said like, yeah, everybody has a sad story. And that was the same. When someone reached out to me with a patellar tendinopathy, it was always the same sad story. Yeah, I developed it. In the beginning, it was no problem. After the warm up, it went away. Then it stayed for the training session. Then the pain was higher afterwards the next day. So super classical with me. And so that all of that didn't help. And yeah, and then I think it was probably 2019. I played 2 to 3 seasons with it and became worse and worse. And then I found out about all the things that you probably also read back then from Rio et al. And yeah, started to dive into the topic. And basically, I started more with decline squats. So not so much about the isometric protocols, which came up later. What I actually made very good results with, great results. I still use them. Yeah, and then I trained myself out of it.
Okay. What did that what did that stone, did that help at all?
No,
Did it
no,
make it
I
worse?
don't know. Sadly, I don't know the English name for it. In German, it's Querfriktion. So that means you like scrap over the structure, and this should stimulate whatever, like like should stimulate the cells to, I have no idea. And so it was traditional
Yeah.
Chinese medicine, but as you know, like you jump on every, how do you say in English, like you jump on every hope or every thing that you think that could help because you're easy to talk into something. And I just tried. I didn't have anything to lose. It didn't do any harm, but it definitely didn't do any good either.
Hmm. Did you go? So you were part of a American football team. Did the medical staff, did they help you out at all, or were they
No, no,
kind of as
as I
clueless
said,
as
like
you?
it's not that professional like in North America. So basically, I was the medical staff. That's harsh, but I was a strength coach. We have one physio, but also back then, like we have different physios every season. And I remember during one bus ride to an away game, I discussed this with the physios, and one of the physios told me, like, yeah, I do single leg gymnastic ball, Swiss ball, leg curls, and that helps a lot with tendinopathy. But I was like, hey, but this is not even like addressing the structure that is hurt. But like if the science is not as far or advanced and people don't know, that was more like, yeah, it's a disbalance between quadricep and hamstring muscle strength. And so some anecdotal evidence carries on and on and on. So I have a lot of these stories. And so, no, there was no help. It was make 4 to 6 weeks, rest 4 to 6 weeks, stretch, come back, and it's worse.
Uh, okay, the first going back when I think the first person, um, so I posted on my Instagram. Cal Dietz, the strength coach and University of Minnesota, had a video on. It was on. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but he had the muscle and the tendon complex, and he said when you lift weights, the muscle gets stronger, but the tendon is like not trained. And then when you do plyometrics, you train the tendon, and then the muscle can get weaker. Paraphrasing, and that's like very incorrect physiologically, but it kind of painted this idea of like you're lifting for the muscle and then you're doing plyos for the tendon. Those are the demanding things when you're doing those type of things. Um, and then, I mean, if you look at it, everything is demanding in both of those actions. But I posted that video and I was like, this is really interesting. And one of my friends, Kyle Dar, sent me a video, Keith Barr, and it was that lecture that he gave a sports congress on tendons. And I was like, I did not know there was anything out there research in the tendons. And Keith Barr was my first person. And then I think it went into Jill Cook and Ebony Rio, and then like Peter Malliaris, Craig Purdom. And then over time, just been exposed to a lot of people. Even in like the last year, we were talking about the Berlin group because you're German. Like I think a year ago, or maybe a year and a half, I didn't even know the Berlin group existed, and I had been so into all the other tendon stuff. But anyways, my first guy was Keith Barr, then Jill Cook, then Ebony Rio. Can you go back to what was the first piece of thing that was even
Yeah,
useful that you
actually,
came across?
it was Jill Cook and Rio, but very soon also the Berlin group. Actually, they are now called Potsdam Group. That's a city close to Berlin, but anyway. Um, because I was fortunate enough when I studied sports science, I had like, do you say Professor Aaron Patzes? Like, he, yeah, he was the main researcher,
Yeah,
and he did.
yeah.
What I really enjoy about them is they came up with a very elegant, simple but elegant research process, and they started to research like, okay, what physical uh, yeah, physical things we can put on a tendon, like frequency, magnitude of strain, etc., etc. And so step by step, they developed their program, the Berlin method. And I was pretty early because I remembered that I had him. And so I dived into, is it dived or dove? Sorry. Like the path of diving.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Dove
Dove
works.
into
Yeah.
their research. And so that I think they did a really good job. And so the picture became very fast, very clear, that you need basically high strain over a certain time to be discussed, mentioning Keith Barr, mentioning the Berlin group. So there are maybe two poles of a spectrum from the duration. And yeah, and the physiology behind it. And so it became pretty fast, pretty clear what to do to actually put a stimulus on the tendon to, yeah, move something in there.
So what have you reconciled for yourself being around those Berlin group of like, okay, high strain and you're gonna do like 3-second holds to accomplish that versus Keith Barr 30 seconds, Ebony Rio 45 seconds. Where do you,
Yeah.
yeah, what have you made of all that? Like now having, I mean, you said since like 2000, you've had so many years to probably think of this like I
Yeah, I
do too,
remember
but what have you made of
that
this?
I read in an article in a paper back then that there was this warm-up phenomenon. And this is something I experienced myself and a lot of people around me. So in the early stages of tendinopathy, the pain goes away with a warm-up. These warm-ups could be different things. In American football, it was A skips, B skips, jogging, then gradually increasing, jumping, sprinting, and it went away. Okay, good. But also it could be simply riding the bike for 10 minutes. That helped some people as well. So there is an effect, the warm-up phenomenon. And then I think it was Rio came up with the 45 seconds, but only to decrease pain, not like to have the solution for the underlying mechanism and the problem. And so that was one thing, but I already knew, okay, that's like only the entry point to decrease pain, but not the solution. And as I said, I stumbled over a lot of research on the decline squat that was more in the early 2000, like 2005, 2000, 2007. And I mean, it's not a by chance that the single leg decline squat is the provocation test for patellar tendinopathy. And so biomechanically, you put the tendon, I always call it like you put the focus of the exercise more on the tendon and the quadriceps and the knee dominant exercise. And again, I worked with that. Funny enough, you posted yesterday on Instagram a video about the compression forces on quadriceps tendons. And I was thinking about this because of the deep knee angle, deep knee bend in the decline squat. But it worked very well with slow tempo. And so I started with this as a dynamic exercise and also added the Berlin method, what was already out back then, like as an addition. So these were like the big things, like the long iso holds, how I call them, like long isometric holds, the decline squat, slow tempo, like we could say heavy, slow resistance training, and the Berlin method. These were the cornerstones.
Hmm. So you're looking at the 45-second holds
Yeah,
as
but you
just
have
like a pain
to
decrease
add to
thing.
this that's, I think in the original material, they said more or less 70% of your maximum voluntary isometric force. And so this is something, when you compare this to the physiological knowledge that we have about tendons, then it can't be something that triggers in an increase in tendon stiffness or collagen synthesis and so on. So I did this really only for like, I don't know, I think in the original research they said 45 seconds with 70% of maximum voluntary isometric force should be more or less like the same, like a 45-second um, maximum hold is more or less 70%. But of course, for a rower, this is different than for a sprinter, the 45 seconds, what force they can. But it was like for a rule of thumb, it was okay. It was sub-maximal to trigger this warm-up phenomenon. But also like an anecdotal thing is that you have to be careful when you decrease the pain and then you train afterwards with decreased pain. It's easy to overload the tendon even more, even if you want to do good for the tendon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that whole idea of like doing the warm-up effect and then doing too much, I know it happened. I mean, it's happened to me so many times with basketball, where it's like you can go in feeling terrible and then you warm up and you go play for 2 hours and then you're limping the next day. Have you had it with the training sessions too? Like if you're doing the single leg decline squat and the Berlin method, have you had the warm up effect happen where like you feel so good, you want to go super heavy and you end up just like doing too much? Or do you typically see that just with the sports, the negatives of the warm up effect with
mainly
the sport?
with the sport, because as I said, the decline squat, or it was already clear that you have to do it slowly, like a slow eccentric tempo, then 1 second in the bottom position. And then I call it not like 3 seconds up. I call it like just get up controlled in the concentric phase. But it was for me very clear that you have to avoid like bouncing into the bottom position. And so like all these reactive things, plyometric wise, change of direction, sprinting, jumping, all these activities, these were really triggering the pain in the next day, what you said about playing basketball. So it was not a big problem in strength training. If you didn't do, for example, like full cleans and like jumping into the steep squat position and stuff. And but that's more like what I worked with a really strong power lifter, and we prepared him to squat 300 kilograms, so it was pretty strong. And I remember that we were way above 200 kilograms already in training, like 240, 260 kilogram, I can't remember. And then, only then, I reintegrated the Berlin method with him, and that triggered, like he didn't have pain for a long time, like several weeks, but this triggered the pain again. And that was when I realized, hey, the Berlin method was actually researched on healthy tendons, and it is simply a very good way to increase stiffness of healthy tendons, but you have to also be careful with these high intensities with pathological tendons, with tendinopathy. Like, to give you also like an insight there.
Yeah. Okay, so you're the things going back. You said the 45-second isos for like you think for the pain decrease. You do the single leg decline squat, slow and controlled, and then you try the you also use the Berlin method. So those are kind of your three methods of developing quadriceps and patellar quad tendon.
Exactly, but
there's
like
just training
back then,
those areas.
now, and also in 2024, I can't remember the authors, but there was a more like an overview review article about interventions for tendinopathy, and they, like, as always with review articles, but they came to the conclusion that you can do a lot of stuff. And like for me, it's more like finding a way to load the patellar tendon in a way where you can expect an increase in stiffness or in collagen synthesis, hopefully, maybe, and so on. But back then, these three methods were my cornerstones. And actually, I did regular bilateral decline squats with a barbell on the back, not single leg decline squat. It was the single leg decline squat was just the pain provocation test.
Oh, okay. So the loading for that was with 2 legs down. Okay. What have you added in now recently? Because so this was part of your. It was called the Jumper's Knee project,
and
right?
the project was more like collecting all the evidence and helping people to understand the bigger picture.
Okay, yeah. So now, because you do a lot of like one-on-one. I mean, you train this volleyball team. What type of things have you added in? Is it more so just for variation, or because you feel like sometimes they need, maybe they don't tolerate. So like you said with the powerlifter, maybe they don't tolerate Berlin method that well. Yeah.
Yeah, so
What other
I
things have
started
you added in?
with the Berlin method to incorporate that, but yeah, in a way where you could guarantee that we start somewhere too low. For example, I usually start with 3 sets of 3 repetitions of these 3 seconds on, 3 seconds off, but maybe somewhere between 70 and 80%. And if this is okay and they tolerate it and the next day no increased pain, then we progress from there. And we progress first with volume, then we decrease the volume again when we increase the intensity. So a very logical approach. And that works very well. But in the end, when you work with professional athletes, like high-level athletes, actually it's more about managing the tendinopathy and not so much rehabilitating it. Like that is possible maybe in the off season. And we try this to get as much out of the off season as possible. But these guys, they live from jumping, like in basketball, like in indoor volleyball and all these sports. And so you can't be 100% sure how many jumps do they do when they train with the ball in the sand. And actually, I came over here and thought the sand is very forgiving, and so you don't have like what I said when I developed tendinopathy, like sprinting on concrete. But it's still very, very present in beach volleyball, patellar and quadriceps tendinopathy. So that was definitely a thing. And then what I tried to do is finding exercises where I can be sure that the tendon is loaded in a positive way, seeing it from a tendinopathy, but also where I can guarantee that some kind of muscular development or neuromuscular development happens. And so it's more like finding creative solutions where with the experience you can expect some positive changes in the tendon, hopefully, but also not overloading the tendinopathy, like with the example of the power lifter. And that was like the main thing that I have to do. But that was a very new thing, actually. I didn't know this exercise. I'm excited if you know that. So what I recommended to them, for example, when they are on the road, because they're traveling the globe, they playing in Brazil and then some weeks later in South Africa and so on. Of course, Spanish squat, for example, also a classical exercise. But I try to find ways to guarantee that like the load or the strain is high enough and where they can hold this strain for a couple of seconds. So what the Berlin method came up with. But in more new exercise that I incorporated, but more in this for warm-up and long iso holds, we also did wall sits if they don't have a leg extension. And there I found out, I didn't know about that. I tried to describe it. If you move your heels super close to the wall and stand on your toes and the heel touches the wall and then you squat down, then you come into more like what is it, like a sissy squat version a little bit. So your knees coming in front of your toes. It's not like knees over toes guy, but it's a little bit this style. And actually, I enjoy this very much as a warm-up exercise to trigger this, or an early rehab exercise, because that's like one step further than the wall sit, and even the single leg wall sit. I really enjoy it, and I think it's a very good thing. But I only incorporated it for a couple of weeks. It's called heel elevated wall sit.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. You said a lot of things there. I want to, no, I want to go on. Actually, it was a recent, okay, yeah, it was a recent, I posted something recently. Greg Lehman, so I did a show with Greg Lehman a while ago, but Greg Lehman had a comment about this whole Berlin stuff, because I did a show with Falk Mersman. Greg did one with Falk before me, and yeah, just trying to understand this idea of straining the tendon. Strain is what leads to adaptation, but then it's like, what if this athlete's already straining the tendon a ton because they're playing sport and we want to try to develop the muscles? Maybe we just want muscular development. Like you said, with that power lifter, you started doing Berlin method, really heavy, stressful things on the tendon, and then the pain comes about. If you're looking at muscular development, or you said like neuromuscular development, and kind of like sparing the tendon, not overloading the tendon further,
Yeah,
what
I'm trying
what are
to
you
find
doing? Yeah.
stimuli which are maybe fresh for the athlete. So not the classical, okay, we go with full squats and then we go with half squats or hex bar deadlifts and really try to increase maximum strength and power and so on. We do this, of course, but if it's not possible because the tendon is easy to irritate, then, for example, I have one athlete, I do, this pendulum squat, like this super deep knee angle. And we do this. And then I try to trigger the
Yeah.
adaptation that we get from these maximum knee flexion, long muscle length, at least in the 3 heads of the quadriceps, hopefully. And going more from a muscular development standpoint and trying to get some percentage of performance increase out of this and not the classical, okay, we have to do our plyometrics, we have to do our squats, and then we have to be maybe more angular specificity for their jumps and so on. But we do this, but if it's not possible, I'm trying to find ways to collect some percentage here and there to increase some things that hopefully add up for their performance. But I split the way of I think about let's call lower body training between what is needed for the tendon and what could we add. Because if I go on the pendulum squat and let them do it slowly, then it's usually not triggering the tendon at all. Because of the knee angle, because of the speed, you can't use as much weight as you would, for example, in a half squat. And so it's a lot less strain of the tendon. And so, and I actually tried to shield them from too many jumps in the strength and conditioning program. What paid off, because our main currency, you could say, is jump height. And we are pretty good at it, but it's like a very delicate balance between performance output and overloading. Like, probably this quote from Verkhoshansky, who said, I think it's Verkhoshansky, I'm not sure, like the Russian, some East European Russian, like, every idiot can make someone tired, but to increase performance and keeping them long-term healthy or as healthy so they can play, that's not that easy. That's management of it. But you can easily overload everything. Like, so that's easy.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense because it's going to be the heavy things or the fast things and probably the things that they're really skilled at that's how they're going to be overloading the tendon. So putting them on something slow and they're not used to, and then the pendulum squat makes a whole lot of sense. I'm curious on you said going into that deep knee angle, you're trying to get the 3 heads of the quads really developed. Quad tendon. So like quad tendon's kind of known for deep knee flexion causing issues. With patellar tendon, have you seen that? Deep knee angles, like really deep squats causing issues?
Exactly the other way around what you said, like quadriceps tendinopathy. And funny enough, when I did a lot of stuff with the patellar tendinopathy and their own program and so on, I got some messages, but maybe in the last couple of years, less than 10, I would say, where someone reached out to me and asked me if the program is also good for quadriceps tendinopathy. And I had maybe like personal 1 or 2 athletes I worked with. And so it was more like experiences and observations I made. And I like observed that deep knee angles were triggering the quadriceps tendinopathy more. But at the same time, you could argue maybe then you need to go into these deep knee angles, but in a systematic approach to strengthen the structure. But now working in beach volleyball, I didn't find out the reason because there is no research about beach volleyball players developing quadriceps tendinopathy. But I think it is the way they jump in the sand. It's not like a reactive way in track and field or indoor volleyball. They are not jumping like onto the sand. They are more like stepping very shallow into the sand and then pushing upwards. And I think something in there triggers more quadriceps tendinopathy because actually like a high percentage of the players have it. And with them, I avoid deep knee angles if the tendon is easily irritated. I do it to hopefully strengthen the structure, what works well when everything else is controlled. But in season, you never know in beach volleyball, maybe you play just 1 game, get kicked out of the tournament, or you play 9 games in 3 to 4 days on a very hard sand because it was raining, and then it's super hard, and they come back and the tendon is irritated. And so you have to adjust every time. But it's a good point. So and this is why I enjoyed the video that you posted yesterday with the quadriceps tendon being compressed in the deep knee angle.
Yeah. Yeah, that video looked really aggressive with that tendon stretch, and I was like, it looks like it's over exaggerated maybe, but maybe it's not. I need to look at a cadaver and see what actually happens. Okay, when you talk about deep knee flexion, how
With,
deep
yeah, it's
how deep are you avoiding?
pain related. So I actually try to put something under their butt. So we usually do these big medicine balls, these slam balls, the slam balls, and then we put maybe 1 or 2 plates underneath it. And so we try to find a restriction where we can clearly say, hey, this knee angle feels good. It's not triggering anything. And then we work with there. And sometimes you have to do that. Yeah, but also,
Hmm.
yeah,
And that's with
also,
like
but
a squat.
so
If you're
this
doing a
is
squat
a
exercise, yeah.
method where we still can train heavy. So have the adaptations hopefully there. What means adaptations? At least keeping their output levels or performance level as high as possible from a neuromuscular standpoint, not so much from a tendon standpoint. And we can train there intensively, but we're not triggering anything. And so that's like a shit. And sometimes we still use it slowly, like slow eccentric, touch it, and then like, let's call it like forcefully up, but not with maximum intent. Because then the risk is very high that they like bounce onto this ball and then you increase. And that's actually something else that I really enjoyed from one study, which I have in all my lectures. That is actually the loading rate, like the force per time. And since when you bounce in, then for a split second, the force is super high. What you can see on every force plate, if you land, then the force is super high for a split second. And this is what actually overloads the tendon. There, the strain is for a short amount of time, maybe above 9% length difference.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Like a plyometric. The Okay, a couple things on that.
Sorry
Actually,
if
I want
I'm
to make
a
sure I
little
write
bit
this
all
down
over
so I
the
remember
field,
bringing
but
this up
I
after
hope
this.
you
No, it's good because my questions are all over the place too. You just say a lot of things that are interesting to me. Well, let me say this one first. Actually, you talk about that. Okay, so in my jumpers knee plan, when I do, like, I call it a health tempo versus a performance tempo, and the health tempo is like 3 seconds down, 3 seconds up, and then performance is like just controlled down and then kind of explode up. Obviously, you do health if you're really sensitive and you just want to slow down the loading. But people have, and you said when you're doing that decline squat, you'll do an isometric at the bottom, and I've kind of like I've never actually told people hold an isometric. I just tell them at the bottom. I just tell them don't bounce out of the bottom, but like kind of just have a smooth transition out of the bottom. And I think I started that because it just reminds me you're working with volleyball players. Anyone who's a jumper, like more of the elastic, explosive athletes, even if they're healthy, if you give them, like I give them triphasic and I give them a 3 second isometric in a squat, and then you want them to like come out of the bottom without a stretch reflex, they'll always get a stretch reflex, you know? Like they'll still bounce out of the bottom. So it's like you want to thinking of the tendon rehab perspective is like, yeah, go slow down, hold at the bottom, and then come up really controlled. And a lot of these athletes will still get a bounce out of the bottom. So is that something you've seen with these like explosive elastic athletes that they still want to get a bounce? And then are you in the tendon, if they're rehabbing a
Yes,
tendon, you're like
I
that you
did,
cannot be doing
but
that?
in beach volleyball it's a little special because you don't have like these super bouncy or less of super bouncy reactive type of athletes. You have them, definitely, and I also have at least one male athlete, maybe one female athlete, because the sand usually kills reactiveness. So you don't have calf or a lot less usage of the calf muscles and Achilles tendon. You don't attack the ground from above. It's more like what I described. But if you have them and they are playing beach volleyball, I try to use isometrics and maybe try something like hex bar deadlifts, and then I eliminate um, the transition phase. Like you go
Hmm.
down and bounce up and so on. So it's like, okay, we have a heavy weight and we lift it up forcefully, but we start from a dead position. And then we still have the positive adaptations of a really heavy hex bar deadlift neuromuscular wise. Then maybe we spare out the eccentric part and drop the weight. And so you still have some kind of stimulus, but of course not the unique stimulus of an eccentric contraction. But I also I use the full spectrum. I also have one athlete, and she's also I would say explosive type athlete, fast twitch dominant, and we use the K box flywheel training with like overloading eccentric, like she's pulling with her arms and then she's braking with her legs only and that stuff. And so that's a high stimulus, very high stimulus. But again, it's more about like finding a good stimulus that keeps them on a certain level or maybe increases the level. But sometimes you spare out with some things because you can't risk to make it worse. And then if they irritated during the game, that's something you don't want.
Okay. You keep saying things that are interesting to me. The K-Box thing, I think this was, I don't know if it was on my show or someone else. Jill Cook, way back when, Jill Cook was saying, I think it was on mine. She was thinking of things that tendons hate, and it was the flywheel training. She's like, tendons hate flywheel training. I think she just kind of said it as a blanket statement. And I kind of took that, and for many years, I was probably like, I didn't have a K-Box. So I was like, okay, they don't like it. But then I think Joel Smith, I think Paul Cater in California. I have a friend in London. I have so many of my friends who have a K-Box and they have tendon issues, and people are getting better with the K-Box. And it makes me wonder does it really matter? I mean, is the reason I'm thinking, why would she say that the tendons don't like it? And I was imagining like a very jerky transition. I would think a tendon wouldn't like that if you're not very good with the transition, you know? But if you have more of a smooth transition, I think that would be a pretty good thing. What's been your experience with the
I
jumpers
mean,
and
if
the
I'm
K-Box? Has it been
really, really
pretty
honest,
positive?
I think it can trigger tendinopathy. Not only trigger, it can develop the tendinopathy. But here's the thing, like the physiology behind it is pretty clear. Like if you use the K-box and you don't use it in a way where you like you have a true supramaximal eccentric overload. So for example, what I mentioned is we do it in front of how do you call it? Like a ladder. Like you can have your hands on something, and then when she pushes up, like we start the wheel, she goes down, and then she starts to push with her legs, and she helps with her hands, pulling on that ladder, like a chin-up. But then she tries to let her hands loose and only brakes with her legs. And so that's a true supramaximal stimulus. But if you don't do this, then I don't see any reason why this should overload the tendon, because physics, like the energy you give into the system is the same energy that you get out. And yes, the flywheel is pulling you down, so it forces you somehow down, but it's not like a supramaximal stimulus, and there's evidence to it. And so that's for me, like if you do some familiarization sessions and you're used to how that feels, that can be from a physiological standpoint a real overload. But if you add the supramaximal stimulus by, for example, helping with your hands and then braking with your legs, then it's simply you diving into like the eccentric part, the eccentric overstimuli. And of course, this can overstimulate, stimulate the tendon. Of course it can. It's then becoming more like let's call it like a strength biased plyometric. Like, you know what I mean? It's not super fast, but it forces you down with more force that you could produce concentrically. And so, of course, the strain on the tendon is higher. But as usual, I would never say this training tool is not for tendons. It's the physiology behind it. Like what happens, how high are the forces, how short is the time period, how high is the strain on the tendon. This is how you can explain it. And it's easily to be explained like this. You have to be careful. And what we did with her last sentence, it was simply, we started with it. It was very promising. She was like the stimuli was so good. She jumped higher, like acute, like in the same week. And for 3 to 4 weeks, we did this. But now we reduced it, like we only do this once a week because it is triggering some kind of tendon discomfort. And so we have to manage it.
That's something you still will use though, is that assistance up and then
No, it's
supramaximal
actually
eccentric. Is that more like an
for her
off-season
and with
thing?
her, like she profited so much from it, athletic wise, physically, that we are trying to do a calculated risk and accepting the fact that she maybe will have minor pain. And like, of course, I control everything. Is it a 5 of 10? Is it a 3 of 10? And next day and during the games, and we make sure that everything is like under control. But we use it as a performance enhancement training method. and very consciously. But we are also very clear that we only can do this cyclically. You know what I mean? Like only once a week and only in very important
Hmm.
periods of the season. But then when they're playing now the World Championships, and if this is over, end of November, then they go 2 to 3 weeks off. They only get long ISO holds for their holidays. And then they're coming back. And then I will dedicate a lot of time developing the tendon and hopefully building up the tendon in a more rehabilitation setting, Berlin method, decline squats, etc., etc. And then only using the K-box for like very important moments where we have a calculated risk. But that's managing tendinopathy in high performance athletes. I would call it this. It's different than getting rid of it because it's annoying and you're recreational.
Hmm. So this calculated risk with the K box, is that one of your tools or methods that's like you've seen have the most performance benefit for
Yeah,
her?
yeah,
And that's
exactly.
why
But
it's,
the
yeah.
stimuli could be put on the body in different things. But the K box is, I actually enjoy it because, you know, I saw from 1080, you probably know the 1080 sprint and 1080 quantum, and I saw from a summit they had that it has also like a very tough, like even emotional, it sounds a little bit funny, emotional response, because this is a training tool. It forces you down. It's not like weight, like even weight releasers. You know, you could go with weight releasers, have a super maximal weight on your back, go down in the squat, the weight releasers fall off, and you stand up explosively. Theoretically, you could copy the K box like this, but with the weight releasers, you have the feeling. This is why I call emotions. You are feeling the same weight during the whole process, but in the K box, something is ripping on you. And this triggers a very aggressive response. I don't want to push it too far, but it's like a survival instinct. Like if you really push in the concentric phase with your arms, with your
Mhm.
legs, and then you're trying to survive when this thing is pulling you down. And so this is like from a neurological and also muscular development standpoint, a very effective stimulus. But from a tendon standpoint, you can clearly say it doesn't have the time, let's call it time under tension, that you need from the Berlin method, what they found out, or longer. It's like only a very short time period. So it's not long enough to trigger very good adaptations in the tendon. Probably something is happening, but yeah, these are my takes to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We were talking about the tendon pain. Yeah, whatever. So recently, I talked with, he's out of Brazil, Rodrigo Scatone, and I did a podcast I'm going to post soon, but we were talking about the tendon tremor. And I think it was Seth O'Neill that first talked about it when someone has Achilles tendinopathy and they're doing a calf raise. And when they control it on the way down, you'll see like this really big vibration they get, like fasciculation of the calf muscles because they can't control it. And I've tried looking a lot into this. He has one short video, and that's like all you can find. And he's talking about that really when things are shaking, it's kind of like that stretch reflex you get, kind of what you're talking about when you come out of the bottom of a squat explosively. It's like a big stretch reflex, a big plyometric. And this tendon tremor, he's thinking this is what's leading to a lot of pain symptoms, can be leading to a lot of pain symptoms. Same things when I talked to Rodrigo with when you're doing leg extensions and you get someone really shaking, is like they're thinking there's this really big fasciculation on the tendon. Have you seen this when you're doing isometrics and when you're doing loading, that this painful side is having like this, it's almost like the brain can't figure out how to work, so it just has this really big shaking. Yeah, have you seen any of that? And have you seen any
Not
like
so
correlation with pain
consciously.
symptoms?
I know what you're describing, but it's not like I saw it with many people. Actually, I saw it many times with ACL rehab, but of course, this is not comparable, but like my initial thought would be that it is some kind of um, conflicting neuronal coordination signals, probably because there's some kind of inhibition, but you still have to contract. So that would be what I would start diving into, like inhibition, conflicting from a coordination standpoint, conflicting signals, afferent nerves. I think you call it this the same way, afferent nerves. like the nerves, there's the signal or the sensitive nerves and the actual nerves going down to the muscle, and that there something is in conflict, and this is why it starts to shake. I would dive into this probably, but it's not like I observed it many times or thought about it.
Yeah. Okay, the sand. I kind of, well, I mean, you've been doing beach volleyball for a while. I think it was a few years ago I had a guy reach out with, and now I don't remember if it was quad or patellar tendon, but it was bad for like many months and years. And he was telling me he was a beach volleyball player. And my immediate instinct, this was years ago, was just like, why do you have it on the sand? Like that's much less tendon load because it's like I don't
Yeah,
even
yeah.
know if you could qualify it as
It's
like
called,
a soft versus
yeah.
a hard surface because people have said it's very different. But yeah, what have you made of being a patellar tendon jump and your experience with American football, rehabbing people, and now you're put on the beach volleyball and you're still seeing patellar and quad.
Yeah,
What have
what
you
you
made of
mentioned,
the
it's called then
sand
the same with
surface?
stiffness, but it's called compliant. Like the sand is compliant, and yeah, it's tough. But I think it's probably more something like, yeah, it is some kind of plyometric, but not in the way we usually think about, like depth jumps, drop jumps, track and field, hurdle jumps. But still, you put a lot of force onto the tendon. There is strain, stress and strain, definitely. And it's high volume because maybe it's in the sand. And again, what I mentioned, the sand has different qualities. There can be very hard sand. And if it was raining, because you only play beach volleyball outdoor, only if you live in cold countries, you have indoor training in the winter, but the tournaments are only outdoor. So if it's wet, if it rained, then the sand is actually super heavy and not compliant. And so I think it's more of an overall volume thing, like how many jumps you did. I always compare, like, I play a little bit of beach volleyball myself, and you can actually play beach volleyball for 3 hours. And 3 hours with just having a sip of water, you know. You play and you play, your legs get tired, your muscles get tired, but your tendon, you don't feel like you played 3 hours straight football or basketball or something, like straight. And so I think the stress and the strain is not so instantly that high. That's true. And there is science about walking, running on sand, that you need a lot more energy because your muscles have to work harder because you don't have the tendon effect, the recoil effect, the stretch shortening cycle so much. But I think it's more the overall volume that you can use and that you use, and probably recovery that you, like my guys and girls, they probably train at least 5 to 7 times beach volleyball a week, plus minimum 2 strength training sessions a week. And when you use there the K box, and then you probably have, I don't know, between 80 and 150 jumps per sessions, sometimes more, sometimes less, sometimes they avoid. I think this is more the reason for it. But I had the same thoughts. I thought I come here, no problems with tendons because of the sand. But yeah, it's high prevalence internationally.
Mm-hmm. The So in the Achilles, or sorry, in the patellar, the anterior knee world, I guess the soleus. They always talk about the soleus can kind of do the job of the quad or work with the quad and kind of offload the front of the knee. You said with the sand, there's less calf and Achilles. Yeah, what do you think is
Mhm.
going on with the
So
calf and
you
Achilles
still
because you're
use your
on this type of
calf
surface?
to push off, definitely. And that's actually a nice keyword, what you said, because besides the actual, let's call it, rehabilitation load or the protective load and the performance enhancement load, think of Berlin method versus K-box or something like this. There could be also other reasons. For me, it is the actual structure that you try to address. Then it's load management, like the number of jumps and the number of K-box sessions you use, but also the kinetic chain. And this is something that is usually also overlooked certain times. And so what we do, we actually add calf training, but it's like a secondary training effect to have some kind of output. There is some output. You use your calf in jumping, even if you don't use it in the same way a track and field athlete use it. But I use it as also, like, let's call it a weighted stretch exercise, or like we sink into deep eccentric stretch and then explode out of it. So just get get the best out of this exercise. And this helps with dorsiflexion, which helps to, let's call it, eliminate energy in the calf complex, Achilles tendon and calf muscles, and not transferring it early onto the knee, onto the patellar tendon. And this helps actually a lot if there is a limitation. And so, I mean, maybe that's a very shallow answer, but it's for me more like I take a big hammer on the calf with seated calf raises sometimes and standing calf raises, and just make sure that they are incorporated in the overall program, but not as a primary focus, and hopefully get the best out of it in case of the kinetic chain. So there's no how would you call it, like a deficiency in the kinetic chain that overloads then in the knee or shows as tendinopathy in the knee. Because my experience is you can make the tendon as stiff as you want in a positive sense. But for example, if you have a very like not a good dorsiflexion in the ankle, then the patellar tendon will be overloaded every time. It's too much force that's not eliminated, or what means eliminated, but which is taken care of in the Achilles tendon and calf muscles, that is then transferred into the knee.
Do you see that ankle dorsiflexion
not as a
limitation
thing in
quite a bit in these
specifically beach volleyball or volleyball athletes? More in, I worked one season in indoor. There were higher prevalence of it. But for example, I had one girl. They were actually at the Olympics, and she had really, really bad ankle dorsiflexion. But we tried a lot. I was coming like new strength coach. Yeah, easy. We do our heavy calf training and weighted stretch, blah, blah, blah. And not like the rubber band mobilization stuff and so on and so on. She tried a lot. But I wasn't able to, like, the knee to wall test, the very basic test. Like, we couldn't increase it 1 centimeter. I think, and this is what the physios also said, it was a bony end. So an anatomical issue, like there was bone to bone ending, probably because the talus is somehow formed like that. And she had knee problems, and that's knee problems like with the cartilage. I don't think that she had patellar tendinopathy, but definitely there was a high load on the knee because of her, how you call it, like restricted ankle dorsiflexion. 100%. And you can actually, that makes sense. Like if you land, every time you land and you can't have any range of motion in the ankle joint, then this is transferred to the knee directly. It is like a decline squat. It's like a decline squat. You stay with your heels in the air, and then it's transferred to the knee directly, and it will show in the knee. However, tendinopathy, maybe cartilage problems, and so on.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. It's like a decline squat. Okay, that was my next question. You kind of already were going on it with the biomechanics piece, because I think recently I was reading they look at jumping and landing actions with people with and without patellar tendinopathy, and I think the common thing is the stiff jumping, stiff landing strategy. Is that the same thing you see with beach volleyball? Is that something that you try to change their biomechanics so that they can have a little bit more smooth jump and land? Or what are your thoughts
that we can use force plates on a daily basis. And I have to say, I think we are actually doing a very good job with managing the patellar tendinopathy. And even if the whole podcast sounded like it's a horrible problem, it is something that is like this in jumping sports. But I never observed that my guys are jumping very stiff or landing very stiff or something. But I try to teach them in certain periods that we need to have a soft landing, or we only do box jumps, for example, so we avoid the landing. But at the same time, when I have a jump progression in the preseason, for example, I do box jumps, and then maybe box jumps with a drop where you have a stiff landing actually, and then maybe a box jump with a counter movement jump, like a drop jump or depth jump. And so we actually make use of this. But to be honest, I did not observe this, but I know what you mean, what you're talking about, and what is in the end like an alternative motor pattern or an adjusted coordinative thing.
Yeah. okay, you were talking about patellar and quad tendon. And I recently I was on some other guy's podcast who
Uh-huh.
works with a lot of American football players, linemen. So like the big people don't know the huge guys that are at the line. And I don't know if it was defensive. I think it was offensive, but he said was seeing a lot of quad tendinopathy, and I was like, kind of like, I don't know why you're getting quad tendinopathy, but kind of the same thing you said. I'm like, you're probably going to be doing heavy squats if you're in the weight room with them. Like maybe decrease the range so that they can have that tendon settle down, and you can then increase the load, so you're getting them stronger and adding some tendon stiffness, but just staying away from provoking it. Um, why do you think you've seen quad tendinopathy in these beach volleyball
Hey,
athletes?
it's super
Is it
tough
are they
because,
deeper
again, as
down when
I
they're jumping
described
and
it
landing,
earlier,
or
there
what?
is no research about it. You won't find a single study about quadriceps tendinopathy in beach volleyball players on different sand surfaces and so on. But with the experience I have and with the athletes I worked with, and not having a lot of quadriceps tendinopathy, or athletes with quadriceps tendinopathy, I think it is this unique jumping approach in the sand you have. It's very hard to describe for me now, but it's more like a very shallow placing the foot like onto the sand, like sliding over it. And then you try, because it is so soft, you try to make it more dense, and you have the whole foot on the sand in one, um, yeah, in one, and not diving into it with your toes first or the ball of the foot first and so on. And this is why you actually eliminate the Achilles tendon. It is already like in a dorsiflexed position a little bit. That's one thing. So you eliminate the calf in its I would call it natural function. So maybe that's one reason why you have more momentum in the knee. Is it called moment? Like torque in the knee, like what I described with the landings. And
Mm-hmm.
then another thing that I observe, and then, for example, when they do it with an approach, like for an attack, and then the energy like shifts over the foot and then only upwards. So it's more like running into and then upwards. And so I think that's a very unique approach, and it's different to a basketball or indoor volleyball where you hammer with your heel down and then up. It's a little bit different. And so I could imagine that biomechanically, this is somehow, but it's absolute hypothesis, somehow biomechanically different, what is usually on a hard surface or running or whatever, what maybe puts the quadriceps tendon more into focus. But it's in most cases not the deep knee angle. There are a lot of blockers. Actually, you have a defender and a blocker, and the defender, he's not in a deep knee angle so often, but there are a lot of blockers who are waiting at the net, and some of them go really ass to the grass, or ass to the sand in this case, really deep down, waiting and then accelerating up. And so there you definitely have these deep knee angles. But yeah, but that's more like it's not like a true counter movement jump. Usually they go down, wait for a second, and then adjust to where the ball is, and so on, and then they come suddenly above the net, and a little bit like a surprise. So it's complicated to describe, but my best guess, or my educated guess, would be that there's a unique biomechanical situation with the sand that probably puts the quadriceps tendon more in the focus, because yeah, more beach volleyball players have it than compared to any other population I worked with before.
Have you thought of in training when you're doing plyometrics, um, because those jumps are so different? Have you thought when I'm on a hard surface, could I make this jump more like the sand jump or less like
Yes
the
and
sand
no.
jump?
So for me, it's
Yeah,
more
have you thought of
the
that?
way of thinking, or what the philosophy I have is they are jumping so much in the sand. So first of all, I don't have to copy it in the gym, and I have to be very careful what I do plyometric wise in the gym. But it is actually like a very good performance enhancement tool to do jumps on a hard surface, because the forces are higher, rate of force development is higher, you can have more of the stretch shortening cycle and so on. So you can use this to an advantage if you don't overload the tendon with it. And so it's more like, okay, when do I do what? But I'm not trying to copy even if it's in the sake of transfer of training, I think they are doing enough in the sand, and I'm trying to develop qualities that they can then use in the sand, and not trying to copy the sand. You know what I mean? I work a little bit with, for example, we have in the gym a very hard rubber surface,
Yeah.
but we also have an artificial like turf. And so I try to work a lot with the turf, what is definitely harder than sand, but not as hard as the rubber surface. And so I try to also use this. But in my philosophy is a lot like, okay, what stimuli will trigger what adaptation and how this will translate into their sport. And so if I want to overload more of the stretch shortening cycle, then I go more like think of hurdle jumps on the turf, for example. But if I want to avoid the overload of the tendon, think more of a box jump, maybe plus a drop.
Yeah. Okay, I'm thinking of, and you could use anecdotes, maybe like single case studies if you want, but we've talked this whole show about outside of the stone that you're using initially, loading, like getting the loading right, rehabbing the tendon by making it stiffer, listening to pain, developing quadriceps, biomechanics, kinetic chain. Other people that you've seen, or maybe even yourself, what are other adjuncts that you've seen work? I'm thinking like injection therapies, putting that strap around the patella. Have you seen any other things that have worked generally, or even like specific individual case studies?
So
what are things that have worked for people or
I
that
got
you've seen?
like you call it
Outside of
cofactors
loading,
or whatever.
outside of the loading, which is
got
probably
you.
the most
So
important thing.
personally,
Yeah.
what was a big surprise to me, because I know that there's in the physio bubble or the athletic trainer bubble, at least here in Europe, they say like how do you call it? Like the color band that you put on the skin. What was it called? Kinesio tape. Kinesio, you know that? So, but I have to say, in my first year with patellar tendinopathy, it helped me a lot. But not the color or whatever. I think it was more the specific, like the how then the patella is gliding, or how much stress then what fiber in the tendon gets. But it helped. Like I could perform and train without pain. Phenomenon, okay. But in the second year, not anymore. Then I used the patella strap, and actually that helped me a lot to train without pain. But afterwards, I couldn't walk stairs for some, like in the third year was horrible. I couldn't walk back to my car. Or I could, but under severe pain. But it helped me to train. Like it decreased pain definitely during the but this is something I call like, okay, just try it as an athlete, try it, listen to your body and use it if it's helpful. This is not for me like a scientific discussion. It's more like try it. There is a reason why so many NBA athletes and players have it and use it, and indoor volleyball players. If somehow these 17,000 fibers of the patellar tendon get less stress with a strap because it adjusts somehow how the patella is pulling on the tendon or so, okay, take it. So that was definitely a thing. Then what I would be very curious about what you think about this, because there's a lot of research done by Keith Barr about it, was or is collagen as a supplement with vitamin C, you know, the basics, take it. But there's conflicting evidence. And I'm a big fan of the Australian Institute of Sport, AIS, and they came up with a position standpoint, or how you call that, like a paper. You can Google it, AIS, collagen tendinopathy, I think. And they clearly point out, yes, do it, use it with vitamin C and so on. But I think if I remember correctly, they refer mainly to Keith Barr, who did it, I think, with artificial collagen stuff and in a laboratory and putting it in. And then he came up. That's an interesting thing, like where I'm very suspicious, to be honest. I think his protocol was something like take it 30 minutes before you work out, because then of the effect of water gets pushed out of the tendon and then it sucks itself back in. And so the water around the tendon is then enriched with collagen and so on and so on. But usually, if the physiology and you read a book about it, that means the tendon is very badly or not good with some nutrients. You know what I mean? Like the support from nutrients. And so I'm very suspicious if this would work. Actually, it's questionable if the collagen survives your whole stomach and acid and so on. But yes, that's the thing. I usually tell them like it's not expensive. Try it, just do it. And here's my last thing. This is what one of my athletes tried. I mean, in Switzerland they have a pretty good like medical support system, and actually that was good. I think that actually had a positive influence. I'm very critical about all the passive treatments like extra corporal shock wave therapy in English. That's right. Can help, but it's more like for me, like most of the
Yeah.
studies are done
Yep.
by normal day people that don't put so much stress on the tendon. And there is actually a review paper came out, I think 2024, I can't remember, and it questioned it. It was a sham treatment or extra corporal shock wave plus both
Mhm.
of the groups did eccentric training, no difference. So questionable. Why do they invent these multi-thousand things and so on? But here's the thing. One of my athletes, he tried, sadly, I can't remember the name, but I described the treatment. So actually it is some kind of shockwave therapy, but they inject small, like very tiny needles into the tendon. And then there is some kind of electrical stimulation between the tendons. It's some called like electro blah, blah, blah shockwave therapy or something like this. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I
Yeah,
can't
I
think of the
can't
name
find
right
it
now.
out if you want to put it in the notes or
Percutaneous
something. But
electrolysis,
this is
maybe something
something
like that.
I usually when they come up with this, I'm super critical, but I do my research, I type it and I try to find some studies about it. And it was like the evidence was okay to good with it and it helped them. So that's then for me like the most important part. Like because with him we had a very tight schedule. And we had to make a big plan, like, okay, we have 6 weeks. How can we manage the situation? He had training camp, then a big competition with a lot of games on hard surface, and he came back, and we had 6 weeks to get him ready for a very important tournament. And so we made a plan, and I think it accelerated actually the rehabilitation, and it worked. And 6 weeks is nothing for tendinopathy if it's severe. It's not a long time. And so I think it helped. So
Yeah.
these are the three things, like the strap, collagen, I don't know. Not a clear yes or no. Could work, could not work, but it's not expensive with vitamin C. And this thing, but not so much like you do it with shockwave therapy, extracorporeal, but not a super clear yes, of course, for me.
Yeah. Yeah, you want my opinion on the collagen. So I mean, they say it's the most abundant protein in the body, collagen. So it's like you'd hope your body would have enough of the precursors to produce it. So I think it was Jill Cook a long time ago said, because she's she probably still is anti collagen supplementation. And a lot of the people in the Tendon, a lot of the podcasts, a lot of them are anti collagen supplementation. And the ones who are for it just say, well, it might help. Go ahead. It's not expensive, you know? But she said if you get like a cut on your skin, your body needs to produce a scar, which is like this collagen formation. And if you were in a really bad shape, you wouldn't be able to produce a scar. But it's like you don't see people get a cut on their skin and it doesn't heal itself because we are more than capable of producing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was Michael Kerr in Copenhagen. He's on very few podcasts. I think he was on uh, two, and one of them he was talking about this whole circadian rhythm thing with tendons and how this progression of tendinopathy happens, and how you have a buildup of collagen to prepare you for the day, and then you have a cleanup at night. And he is speculating that this progression of tendinopathy is an accumulation of collagen fragments within the tendon that are not effectively cleaned up because something had happened with their circadian rhythm or something like that. So I look at it and I'm like, we know too, when you have someone with tendinopathy, their tendon gets thicker, you know? Like, so it has more fluid, it has probably more collagen fragments. It's like, is it that we are not capable of producing enough collagen, or is it that we're not cleaning up the tendon enough? Because, so yeah, but it's the same. I do the same thing you do, where I'm like, if you think it can help and if it's cheap and you don't mind spending money, go ahead and take it. Probably what's more important is that they're just getting enough protein in general and enough carbohydrates and fats to fuel their training and fuel their recovery. But yeah. Okay, Jonas, we went over time a little bit, but yeah, man, this has been good. Why don't you tell everyone
Yeah, I think the best
Where to find you?
source is
Online or in
Instagram.
person
So
or
there are
whatever? Yeah.
two profiles. My personal profile was more insights in beach volleyball and athletic stuff, performance stuff. Is KUK Frankfurt. It stands for Strength and Conditioning Frankfurt, but in German, Kraft- und Konditionstraining Frankfurt, KUK. And the other one is mehap.project. And this is small Tendon.
Perfect. And
I appreciate that,
this
Sam.
was made possible by Sam Boringer, so we appreciate the introduction. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
in the
Well, next time I'm in
the
Switzerland, we'll have to do it
river.
again. Have our yes.
That's nice.
I did
Didn't
go.
die.
I did go. Yeah, I did go in the river a couple times. It was. Well, it's unlike anywhere else I've been because it's like you can just there. How many
Yeah.
places do you just jump in? Or so many people jumping in clean rivers and then getting out of them. And
Not
I was
damn,
fearful
but
though
I know
of
what you
the.
mean. Like I don't know the
What did you
English
say
name, but
to
I'm
watch
glad
out
you
for?
didn't die. You're still here, so
The
everything
dam.
worked.
Yeah, the dams that.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Bye.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on.